They say grief comes in waves, but for me it came like a storm, sudden, merciless and endless. It had been the happiest morning of my life. Mark was leaving for a short business trip. Just 2 days, he said. He kissed me twice before walking out the door. One quick, one slower, the kind that lingers long after the door closes. He always did that. Said he didn't like goodbyes, only see you soon. I never imagined those would be the last words I'd hear from him. That evening, I cooked his favorite pasta, waiting for his call. When the phone finally rang, it wasn't his number. It was his mother, Ellen. Her voice was trembling, raw, almost unrecognizable. "Sarah," she whispered, and I knew. Something in me already knew. "There's been an accident," she said. It was bad. The car caught fire. He didn't." The rest of the sentence vanished into static. The room spun. I remember dropping the phone, hearing it hit the floor before I did. The next thing I remember was waking up on the couch, with Ellen sitting beside me, holding my hand. Her face was pale, her eyes red. "He's gone, sweetheart," she said softly. They're arranging a private ceremony. I'll handle everything. You shouldn't see him like this." Those words haunted me for months. You shouldn't see him like this. No coffin. No grave. Just a closed envelope with ashes and a death certificate that didn't even feel real. I asked to see the hospital report, the police file, anything. She told me it would only hurt me more. "Let him rest," she said. "He wouldn't want you to remember him that way." So I didn't fight her. I was too numb to. Days blurred into nights. I slept with his shirt next to me, his scent fading a little more each morning. Sometimes I imagined hearing his footsteps in the hall, a ghost my mind refused to let go of. Friends came, whispered condolences, brought flowers, and then slowly stopped visiting. Ellen came often at first. She'd make tea, talk about moving forward, talk about what Mark would have wanted. But there was something in her eyes I couldn't name. Pity, yes, but also something guarded. Once, I asked her why there hadn't been any news, no articles about the crash. She said the company covered it up to avoid attention. "Let the past rest," she repeated. But the past refused to rest. It lingered like smoke in the corners of the house, in the silence of my nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face in that last morning light, smiling, alive, saying, "See you soon." And every time I woke, I wondered if somehow, somewhere, he still was. Grief didn't fade. It simply learned how to sit beside me. Days turned into months, and the world kept moving while I stayed still, trapped in the same house that smelled faintly of him. First, Ellen came often. She brought groceries, handled paperwork, spoke to insurance agents, always saying she wanted to take care of things. I was grateful, or maybe just too broken to question her. Every time she mentioned Mark's name, her voice trembled in that precise, practiced way that made me believe she was hurting too. But slowly, her visits changed. She started avoiding my questions about his belongings, the crash, the hospital. Once, when I asked if there had been any investigation, she said sharply, "Sarah, stop torturing yourself. Let him go." It sounded less like comfort and more like an order. I tried to rebuild my life, or at least pretend to. I sold our car, packed away his clothes, moved to a smaller apartment. The silence there was different. Not haunted, just hollow. I found work at a local bookstore, surrounded by stories that didn't end in ashes. The customers were kind, but their smiles reminded me of how much pretending people are capable of. Sometimes at night I'd dream of him, standing at the end of the street calling my name. In those dreams, he never looked burned or broken. He looked alive. And when I woke, I'd find tears on my pillow and my heart pounding like I'd just missed a train I was meant to catch. I told myself it was just grief, that my mind was desperate for closure. But the feeling wouldn't leave. There were moments, small, fleeting, when something didn't fit. His company never sent condolences. His phone number remained active for months before suddenly disappearing. Even the death certificate looked strange. No hospital name, no signature from a doctor. Only an official stamp perfectly placed. One afternoon I went to the crash site, hoping to find peace. The road was quiet, empty. No flowers, no cross, no sign that anyone had ever died there. I stood on the shoulder, watching the cars pass, and felt a chill I couldn't explain. When I told Ellen I'd gone, her reaction startled me. She froze, eyes wide, then forced a smile too quickly. "You shouldn't go back there," she said. "It's dangerous. Promise me you won't." Her tone wasn't worried, it was afraid. That night I opened the small box where I kept everything of his. His watch, his letters, our wedding photo. I noticed the envelope with the ashes Ellen had given me. It was sealed too perfectly. Heavy. For the first time I wondered what was really inside. A full year had passed since the night she said he was gone. But in my chest, something whispered that Mark wasn't finished with this world. And maybe neither was she. A year had passed, but grief had become more than an emotion. It was a routine. Wake up, breathe, survive, repeat. Every day felt like living in a photo that had lost its color. Then, one afternoon, everything changed with a single message. I was shelving books at the store when my phone buzzed. It was from Julia, a woman I used to work with before Mark's accident. "Hey, Sarah. I know it's been forever, but I'm helping organize an event for a client. A birthday celebration for someone pretty important. Would love your help for a few hours. Good pay, good distraction. Interested?" For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of curiosity. A new place, new faces. Maybe it was what I needed. I replied yes without asking who the client was. The next evening, I arrived at the venue. A grand suburban mansion glowing with soft golden lights, laughter spilling out into the night. The place was crowded, polished, perfect. As I walked inside, something familiar brushed the edge of my mind. The scent of lilacs. Mark's mother used to wear lilac perfume. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Julia greeted me, handed me a clipboard, and pointed to the dining hall. "The hostess is amazing but very particular. Just make sure the seating is perfect." When I stepped inside, my heart stopped. Framed on the wall was a photo. Ellen, smiling, younger, standing in that same room. I couldn't breathe. The client was her. I wanted to leave. Every instinct told me to walk out. But my legs wouldn't move. It felt as though the air itself was pulling me closer, whispering that someone was waiting. The guests began to arrive, all elegantly dressed, carrying expensive gifts and empty compliments. Ellen moved through the crowd like a queen, shaking hands, laughing softly. When her eyes met mine, her expression froze for a fraction of a second. Then she smiled, that polished, practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Sarah," she said smoothly, as if my presence were completely natural. "How lovely to see you. I didn't know you'd come." I forced a polite smile. "Neither did I." She turned away before I could say more. I tried to focus on my work, arranging name cards, adjusting tablecloths, pretending I wasn't trembling. Then I saw him. Across the room, tall, familiar, alive. The way he adjusted his cufflink, the curve of his jaw, the small scar near his ear. Details I could never forget. Mark. For a moment the world went silent. My vision blurred. I thought I was hallucinating. He was standing beside Ellen, speaking to a woman I didn't recognize. Younger, flawless, wearing a diamond ring that glittered under the chandelier. He laughed. That laugh. The one I'd memorized. My knees almost gave out. I gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. It couldn't be him. It shouldn't be him. But when he turned and looked toward me, even just for a second, I knew. My husband was alive. And the woman who told me he was dead was standing right beside him, smiling as if nothing had ever happened. The room spun around me. Laughter, clinking glasses, music. But all I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat. It thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else. Mark was alive, breathing, smiling, talking, and standing only a few meters away from me, as if the last year had been nothing but a cruel, elaborate nightmare. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't obey. Every instinct screamed that I should go to him, grab his arm, say his name. But what if I was wrong? What if grief had finally broken something inside me? Then he spoke. I couldn't hear the words over the noise, but his voice, that voice, hit me like lightning. Low, calm, familiar. There was no mistake. My fingers went numb around the glass I was holding. Julia said something to me. I didn't hear it. I just nodded, smiled automatically, and drifted through the crowd like a shadow. I had to see him up close. Had to know. Ellen noticed me before he did. Her eyes snapped toward mine, and for the briefest moment, her mask slipped. The polite smile vanished, replaced by pure panic. Then, just as quickly, she recovered, laughing, touching someone's arm, pretending nothing was wrong. That was when I understood. She knew I'd find him. And she'd done everything to prevent it. Mark turned then, facing me across the room. For one frozen heartbeat, our eyes met. His expression was calm, polite even, but not a flicker of recognition crossed his face. Felt like dying all over again. He looked at me the way you look at a stranger. Then, gently, he placed his hand on the shoulder of the woman beside him, the woman in the diamond ring, and led her toward another group. I stood there, cold, hollow, invisible in a room full of people. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my voice stayed trapped somewhere behind my ribs. Instead, I slipped out through the back hallway toward the terrace. The night air hit my face, sharp and cold. I sat there, shaking, replaying everything Ellen had told me. The accident, the ashes, the fake condolences, the way she always stopped me from asking questions. It had all been a lie. But why? I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, Ellen stood there, her smile gone now. You shouldn't have come, she said quietly. You have no idea what you've done. I stared at her, barely breathing. He's alive, I whispered. You told me he was dead. She hesitated just a second too long. He doesn't remember you, she said finally. And it's better that way. Then she walked away before I could speak again, disappearing into the glow of the house like a ghost retreating to her haunt. For a long time I just sat there, listening to the muffled laughter inside. The laughter of people who thought they knew the truth. But I knew better now. The man I buried wasn't dead. He was living a new life under the control of the woman who had lied to me, and maybe to him. And no matter what it took, I was going to find out why. Sleep never came that night. I lay awake replaying Ellen's words again and again. He doesn't remember you. And it's better that way. Every syllable felt like a knife wrapped in silk. If Mark truly had lost his memory, why had she told me he was dead? And if he hadn't, then what had she done to make him forget me? The next morning I drove back to my old house, the one I'd shared with Mark before the accident. The windows were boarded now. Ellen had sold it months ago. But I still had a key, the one I'd never returned. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old memories. The mail slot was jammed with unopened letters. One caught my eye. Official hospital correspondence, dated the week after the crash. The envelope had been sliced open, then taped shut again. I took it outside into the sunlight and carefully peeled the tape away. Inside was a discharge form. Patient, Mark Evans. Status: head trauma, non-fatal. Released to guardian, Ellen Evans. My hands trembled so hard I could barely hold the paper. She had taken him from the hospital herself. She'd signed for him. And then she'd buried me in lies. I spent the next days piecing together everything. Old messages, bank statements, every detail that hadn't made sense before. After the death, Ellen had transferred Mark's accounts into a new trust. She'd sold his house, moved him into a gated estate under another name, and surrounded him with people from her world, the kind that never asked questions as long as the money was good. The new woman, the one with the diamond ring, was the daughter of Ellen's business partner. A merger disguised as a marriage. It wasn't about love. It was about legacy. When the realization hit, I felt something colder than anger, clarity. She hadn't lost a son. She had rewritten him. That evening I parked across the street from Ellen's mansion. The windows glowed with soft yellow light. I could see shadows moving inside, Mark's silhouette still so familiar. He laughed at something. The sound drifted faintly through the open window, distant and wrong. I whispered his name once, too quietly for him to hear. Then I started the car. I wasn't going to confront him yet. Not like this. If Ellen had spent a year building a lie, I would spend as long as it took to uncover every piece of it, carefully, quietly, until the truth stood naked in the light she feared so much. Because one thing had become certain. Ellen stole my husband's life. And I was going to take it back. A week passed before I made my move. Every hour of those days felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the storm. But storms don't scare me anymore, lies do. Ellen was planning another event. A charity dinner, grand and glittering, full of the people she loved to impress. And that was where I'd end it. Not in whispers, not in shadows, but under the same golden lights where she had pretended to be untouchable. I arrived late, dressed simply, almost invisibly. The staff assumed I belonged there. People like Ellen rarely noticed the quiet ones until it was too late. I walked among the guests, carrying a calm that wasn't real. Inside my heart was fire. Then I saw him, Mark. Perfect suit, perfect smile. He was talking to investors, his hand resting lightly on the arm of the woman beside him. But when his eyes drifted across the room, they found me. And something flickered. Confusion, recognition, fear. He froze mid-sentence. The world around us blurred. For a heartbeat, it was just us again, the way it used to be before everything burned down. Then Ellen noticed. Her hand tightened around a glass. Her eyes went sharp, cold. She moved toward me, her smile mechanical. "Sarah," she said softly, voice like poison wrapped in silk. "You're not supposed to be here." Smiled back. "Neither is your lie." The words fell heavy, cutting through the music. Heads turned. I pulled the envelope from my bag. The hospital form, signed with her name. "This," I said, "is the day you took him from the hospital. You told me he was dead." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Ellen's face didn't move, but her knuckles whitened around the glass. "You don't understand," she began. Mark stepped closer, eyes darting between us. "What is this?" he asked quietly. "Why is she saying?" "Because it's true," I said. "You didn't die. You lost your memory. She told me you were gone. She buried you in lies to make you her perfect son again. One who wouldn't remember the life she didn't approve of." Ellen's voice cracked for the first time. "I did it to protect you," she shouted. The room fell silent. Mark just stared at her. The color drained from his face. "Protect me," he whispered. "From my own wife." She tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. And in that moment, that single small gesture, I saw everything collapse inside her. The empire she built on deception turned to dust before everyone's eyes. Mark looked at me then, really looked, as if searching the corners of his mind for a memory long buried. And then, softly, almost brokenly, he said my name. "Sarah." It wasn't full recognition. Not yet. But it was enough. Tears blurred my vision as the crowd began to disperse, the silence between us louder than applause. Ellen stood motionless, surrounded by the fragments of her own perfection. No more smiles. No more control. Just truth, raw, exposed, and merciless. That night, I walked out of her house with nothing but my name, my proof, and the sound of my husband saying it for the first time in a year. It wasn't victory. It was survival. And for me that was enough. Silence. That's what I remember most after it was over. Not the whispers, not the headlines, not even Ellen's last look. Just silence. A silence that felt like the first real peace in years. Mark left with me that night, though neither of us spoke. The car ride was heavy, the air between us filled with everything unsaid. He didn't remember the details, our wedding, our home, the small life we'd built, but pieces of me lingered in him somewhere. He said the sound of my voice felt familiar, like music he'd once loved but forgotten the words to. For weeks, he tried to fill the empty spaces in his mind. Old photos, letters, places we'd been. They stirred something but not enough. And I learned something too. You can't rebuild the past. You can only start from what's left. Ellen disappeared from public life. The charity dissolved. The mansion went quiet. Some said she moved abroad. Others whispered she'd checked into a clinic. I didn't care to know. There was no satisfaction in her fall. Only exhaustion. Revenge never felt like victory. Only the absence of fear. One afternoon, Mark came to see me at the bookstore where I'd gone back to work. He looked softer somehow, stripped of the polish she'd built around him. He handed me a small box. Inside was the wedding ring I'd buried in a drawer a year ago. I don't remember the moment I gave it to you, he said. But I remember why. I didn't cry this time. I just smiled, faint and real. Then maybe that's enough, I said. We didn't make promises that day. We didn't talk about forever. We just walked together to the corner cafe where it all began. Two people who had already survived the worst. Sometimes I still dream about the night I saw him again. The shock, the disbelief, the way my world tilted and rearranged itself. But in those dreams, Ellen isn't there anymore. It's just us, older, quieter, finally free. Love, I've learned, isn't always about memory. Sometimes it's about choice. About deciding to love again even when the story you started was stolen from you. When I lock the shop each evening, the streetlights glow soft and gold. The world feels wide again. And in that stillness, I finally whisper the words I couldn't for so long. I forgive you. Not for her. Not even for him. But for me. For the woman who refused to stay buried in someone else's lie.